Dear students, today we shall discuss another highly important topic from the CSS and PMS syllabus. The topic is describe the civilization of pre-Islamic Arabia. At first glance, this question appears very similar to the topics we have already studied, such as the age of Jahiliyyah and the conditions prevailing in Arabia on the eve of Islam. However, there is an important distinction that every serious CSS aspirant must understand. The earlier questions asked us to evaluate or analyze the social and moral condition of Arabia before Islam. This question, however, asks us to describe its civilization. What is the difference? When historians use the word civilization, they do not merely refer to moral conduct. Civilization encompasses the total way of life of a people. It includes their political organization, economic system, social structure, religious beliefs, language, literature, customs, trade, arts, architecture, and intellectual achievements. Therefore, if a student writes only about idol worship, tribal wars, and the oppression of a woman, the answer will remain incomplete because those subjects explain only to the condition of society, not the civilization as a whole. Today, our objective is to reconstruct the complete picture of Arabian civilization before the advent of Islam. We shall see that it was neither a complete primitive society nor a fully developed state. Rather, it was a civilization of remarkable contrast, rich in language and commerce, yet deficient in political unity and ethical foundations. This balanced understanding is precisely what the CSS examiner expects. Before examining civilization, we must first understand the land in which that civilization developed. The Arabian Peninsula occupies one of the most strategic locations in the world. Situated between Asia, Africa, Europe, it formed a natural bridge connecting the great civilizations of antiquity. To its north lay the Byzantine Empire, to its northeast the Sasanian Empire, to the southwest the kingdom of Aksum in Abyssinia. Yet, despite this advantageous position, most of Arabia consisted of deserts, rocky plateaus, and scattered coasts. Rainfall was limited, agricultural land was scarce, and permanent rivers were virtually absent. This harsh environment profoundly influenced the Arabian civilization. A famous observation attributed to historians is geography shapes history. In the case of Arabia, geography also shaped civilization because water was scarce, populations clustered around wells and oases. Because fertile land was limited, many tribes adopted nomadic lifestyles because agriculture alone could not sustain the population. Trade became essential, thus, the physical environment became the foundation upon which Arabian civilization evolved. Let us first examine the political aspect of civilization. Unlike Rome or Persia, Arabia possessed no centralized empire. There was no emperor ruling the peninsula, no parliament, written constitution, permanent bureaucracy. Instead, political authority rested with the tribe. Every tribe functioned almost like a miniature republic if its chief or sheikh governed through consultation with tribal elders. His authority depended less on coercion than on personal qualities such as courage, generosity, wisdom, and the confidence of his people. This feature is significant because it reveals that Arabs were familiar with consultation even though their system lacked formal state institutions. However, the absence of central authority also produced serious weaknesses. Each tribe defended its own interests. Conflicts frequently escalated into prolonged wars. There was no impartial judiciary to resolve disputes peacefully. Thus, political decentralization ensured dependence upon prevented national unity. The heart of Arabian civilization was the tribe. To understand pre Islamic Arabia, one must first understand tribal life. The tribe provided identity, protection, justice, economic support, and military security. Without tribal affiliation, survival in the desert became extremely difficult. This explains why tribal loyalty occupied such an important place in Arab society. Their social relationships were based upon kinship rather than citizenship. Family honor became collective honor. Likewise, one person's offense often became the concern of the entire tribe. Although this system promoted solidarity within tribes, it also encouraged rivalry between tribes. Consequently, Arabian society displayed both cooperation and conflict simultaneously. The family remained the basic social institution. Marriage existed in various forms, some of which were later abolished by Islam. In many tribes, the father exercised extensive authority over family affairs. Women's status differed from one region and tribe to another. For example, women in commercial centers such as Mecca could engage in trade. The life of Khadija bint Khuwailid before Islam illustrates that economically active women were not unknown. Nevertheless, many customs reflected significant gender inequality. Inheritance rights for women were generally absent. Forced marriages occurred. Polygamy lacked numerical restrictions. In some tribes, widows themselves became part of inherited property. The most tragic custom remained female infanticide. The Quran later condemned this practice in powerful language. When the girl buried alive is asked, for what sin was she killed? Thus, while Arabian civilization respected family ties, it often failed to safeguard the dignity and rights of women. Despite its deserts, Arabia developed an impressive commercial civilization because agriculture remained limited. Trade became the lifeblood of the economy. The city of Makkah occupied a particularly advantageous position. Caravans traveled north towards Syria during summer and south towards Yemen during winter. The Quran refers to these journeys the journeys of winter and summer. These trade routes connected Arabia with the Mediterranean world, East Africa, Persia, and India. Merchants transported spices, leather, perfumes, textiles, incense, livestock, and precious metals. The Quraysh earned considerable prestige through their commercial activities. Markets also played an important role. Among the most famous was the market of Okaz, which served not only as a commercial center but also as a venue for literary competitions, political discussions, and social interaction. Thus, trade in Arabia promoted both economic prosperity and cultural exchange. However, ethical regulations remained weak. Usury, dishonest trade, hoarding, and exploitation of debtors were common practices. Islam later retained commerce but transformed its ethical foundations through honesty, justice, and prohibition of riba. Religion occupied a central position in Arabian life. Originally, the Arabs inherited the monotheistic teachings of Prophet Ibrahim al-Islam and Prophet Ismail al-Islam. Gradually, however, this tradition became mixed with pagan beliefs. Historical reports associate Amr bin Luhay with introducing widespread idol worship into the Hijaz. By the 6th century Christ era, approximately 360 idols surrounded the Kaaba. Among the most famous were Hubal, Lat, Uzza, Manat. Pilgrimage continued to attract visitors from across Arabia, but many of its original Abrahamic practices had become intertwined with polytheistic rituals. Nevertheless, Arabia was not religiously homogeneous. Jewish communities flourished in Yathrib and Khyber. Christian tribes lived in Najran and northern Arabia. A small number of sincere monotheists known as Hunafa or Hanif rejected idol worship and searched for the original faith of Ibrahim al-Islam. Therefore, religious diversity formed an important characteristic of Arabian civilization. Perhaps the greatest achievements of pre-Islamic Arabia lay in its language and literature. Although literacy remained relatively limited, oral culture reached extraordinary heights. Poetry occupied the highest point among all literary forms. Poets served as historians, journalists, diplomats, and spokesmen for their tribes. Through poetry, they celebrated victories, preserved genealogies, criticized enemies, and immortalized heroic deeds. The famous Mu'allaqat, traditionally regarded as masterpieces of Arabic poetry, demonstrate the remarkable linguistic sophistication of the Arabs. Annual literary gatherings at the Market of Okaz encourage healthy competition among poets. This literary environment explains why the Quran's eloquence astonished its earliest listeners. The Arabs immediately recognized that its language differed fundamentally from ordinary human speech. Arabian civilization possessed numerous customs that reflected both noble values and problematic practices. Hospitality became one of its defining virtues. Receiving and honoring guests brought immense social prestige. The legendary generosity of Hatim Tai became proverbial throughout the Arab world. Similarly, courage, loyalty, fulfillment of promises were highly respected. At the same time, drinking, gambling, revenge, excessive tribal pride remained deeply embedded in social life. Thus, Arabian culture combined admirable personal virtues with customs that frequently undermined justice and social harmony. Life in the desert demanded resilience. Frequent tribal conflicts produced experienced warriors. Young men learned horse riding, archery, swordsmanship, and endurance from an early age. Military skill became closely associated with honor, yet these capabilities often served tribal rivalry rather than collective security. Islam later redirected these military traditions toward the defense of justice and protection of the Muslim community. Compared with the neighboring civilizations such as Rome and Persia, Arabian achievements in monumental achievement architecture were relatively modest. The nomadic lifestyle limited large-scale construction. Nevertheless, Southern Arabia, particularly Yemen, displayed more advanced architectural traditions due to its settled agricultural communities. Structures such as the Marib Dam illustrate significant engineering capabilities and demonstrate the parts of Arabia possessed sophisticated hydraulic technology long before Islam. The Kaaba itself remained the most important religious structure in the peninsula, serving as both a spiritual and a commercial focal point. At this stage, it is important to pause and ask an important question to my students. Was pre Islamic Arabian civilization entirely backward? The answer is no. Such a conclusion would oversimplify history. The Arabs possessed remarkable strengths. They mastered eloquent Arabic. They excelled in long distance trade. They demonstrated courage under difficult conditions. They valued hospitality. They maintained strong family and tribal solidarity. They preserved history through oral tradition with astonishing accuracy. These qualities later became important foundations upon which Islamic civilization developed. At the same time, the civilization suffered from profound weaknesses. Political fragmentation prevented national unity. Religious corruption weakened spiritual life, economic exploitation increased inequality, tribalism obstructed justice, women often lacked legal protection, blood feuds undermined social stability. Thus, although Arabian civilization possessed significant human potential, it lacked the moral framework necessary for lasting progress. Dear students, this leads us to an important historical insight. Islam did not emerge in an empty desert inhabited by uncivilized people. Rather, it emerged within an existing civilization that possessed considerable strengths alongside serious deficiencies. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, neither rejected everything that existed nor accepted everything uncritically. Instead, he preserved what was noble and reformed what was unjust. Hospitality remained. Honesty was strengthened, consultation evolved into shura, trade continued over ethical regulation, poetry survived but was redirected toward truth and wisdom. Thus, Islam transformed Arabian civilization from within rather than replacing it entirely. As the historian Philip K. Hitti observed, Islam was not merely a new religion, it was a social revolution. Likewise, W. Montgomery Watt emphasized that Muhammad transformed the fragmented tribes into a united community. These observations remind us that the rise of Islam represented not only a religious event but also a profound civilizational transformation. Dear students, whenever you encounter this question in CSS PMS examination, remember that the examiner expects you to present a comprehensive portrait of civilization rather than merely recounting social evils. A high scoring answer should answer, describe, The political organization, social structure, family life, status of women, economy, religion, literature, customs, military traditions, and cultural achievements of pre-Islamic Arabia. It should acknowledge both the accomplishments and the limitations of that civilization and conclude by explaining how Islam preserved its strengths while correcting its deficiencies. I would like to conclude today's lecture with this reflection. Pre Islamic Arabian civilization was a civilization of resilience, eloquence, commerce, and strong communal bonds shaped by the demanding environment of the Arabian Peninsula. Yet it was also marked by political fragmentation, religious pluralism, mixed with widespread idolatry, social inequality, and the absence of universal ethical standards. The advent of Islam did not erase this civilization, rather, it reflected its virtues, corrected its injustices, and redirected its immense human potential toward the creation of one of the most influential civilizations in the world history. Thank you.